There are lots of video game moments that give me chills because I'm a very emotional and person who's susceptible to all kinds of narrative manipulation. I was watching the trailer for Overwatch 2 the other week and I got a little bit misty-eyed at the bit where Winston's about to die because there's no narrative to Overwatch apart from the thing you go and search for outside the game, and like just those little trailers, oh my god, ruined me. But if I'm going to talk about a specific video game moment that really gave me chills, I'm going to have to go back to 2010 with Halo Reach, because not only did Halo Reach, signify, Bungie going back to their roots of the Halo franchise in terms of making it a prequel to the very first Combat Evolved. It was their farewell tour. It was their goodbye to the franchise that cemented them as being such legendary video game developers. And then obviously, the way, for those who have played it, the game ends with you basically staying behind on Reach to shoot down a bunch of ensuing Covenant ships that are trying to chase down the ship that is actually storing Master Chief, and that's when they discover the Halo world or whatever. But the epilogue takes place where you're just kind of like, wow, I'm abandoned on this planet, completely overrun by Covenant, this is terrible. And then they make the decision that you play as your Spartan, and you take on just an endless wave of Covenant soldiers. So you can actually hold out for quite a long time.
I was going to say, how long did you hold out for?
I can't remember. I think I kind of maybe got like absolutely brutalized by a brute out of nowhere. With the brutes, they weren't in Reach. It was just probably an elite. But yeah, I got absolutely ruined. And obviously, when you die, you get a little cutscene of your dude fighting them all off. The helmet falls off, and then it cuts many, many years later, and you see that same helmet like kind of worn down and eroded by the sands of time. I just thought it was one of the best ways for not only just a game to end, but for Bungie to kind of just basically say, that's us done now. That's the player's legacy cemented in and of the mythology too, which I just think is a really beautiful touch for what is an FPS game.
I would just like to just sort of pick up where Ewan started there. I too am someone who's very susceptible to chills because the central heating in my flat's not particularly good. But, Final Fantasy VII Remake, you and I both know, Scott, we put a lot of emotional investment into this game, more than we should, because we've learned we've been burned before. Like, we do know you don't get invested in these things. Played it. Obviously, initial reactions are what they've done is they've taken the game you know and love, and they've made everything new and big and exciting and sleek and sexy and modern, and it looked like Final Fantasy VII, but made for the PS4. It was absolutely fantastic. But the moment that gave me the chills was the bit, and it's just the slightest change they've made. There's a bit in the first disc when you first properly meet Aerith and you fall into a church, and then the pair of you decide, we best get back to Sector 7. So you jump out and you run along all the tops of these buildings to get back. Now, in the original game, the camera angle for that is pointing down at you, right? And you run across the tops of the things. But when I came out of the church in Final Fantasy VII, the remake, the camera angle is, of course, hovering behind the player the whole time. It's not set the way it is. And so when I came out of the church, for the first time, I actually saw pretty much all of the slums of Midgard. And the sun was coming in under the bottom of the plate, and you could just see the tops of all this. And it genuinely fully took my breath away. Like, I stopped and gasped because for the first time in the game, it wasn't like rebranding or remaking or like upgrading something you'd already seen. It was going, hey, do you know how you always imagined this? Do you know how you've spent fully 20 years picturing what this would be like? There it is. There was genuinely a point where I was playing it a little later after that, and my girlfriend said, I'm not playing this. It would do my nut in the fact that you can't run. And I had to say, you can run. I'm just walking everywhere, taking it all in. And that genuinely, seeing it all laid out like a real world for the first time, it was just like proper gasp, like catch your breath kind of moment.
Okay, I'm stepping away from the franchise. Sort of, it has implications for stuff outside. It's been building up because mine is a standalone game. There's no before, there's no after. I mean, there might be an after, but it would probably not be a very good idea. I played quite a few years ago Firewatch. Thank you. That's the response I was looking for. Because when you say the word breathtaking, it's kind of the game that immediately comes to my head, because like there's so many intensely beautiful scenes in that. The moment that I think gave me chills the most was towards the end, when there's been this huge build up with the mystery of like, who's this shadowy figure moving around? What's this like supposed government secret? And then essentially it all boils down to Ned and his son. Oh gosh, what was his son's name? Brian.
Come on, yes,
Little Ned.
Ned and his son Brian, and they supposedly sort of got up and left one day. And when you make it down beneath some of the rocks and someone locks you in, you're trying to find a way back out into the open. And there you see what actually happened to Brian, and his bones are laying there. And it all just came together so beautifully at the same time. It's been just so tragic. Like, that's not the outcome you were expecting. And yeah, it did everything for me. It hit every emotional tick box.
I completely messed up the end of that game. I walked right past the final area where he's been living the whole time. Literally found the bones and was like, oh, I get it. He hasn't been able to escape, and that's really tragic and that sucks. And then I just walked past the entrance to the room and just went home, just sort of having to go. I've got other stuff to do.
I'm not sticking around. I'm gonna hop on that helicopter. I'm out.
Yeah, he's out watching his clock as he walks past. She's like, gonna make it home for tea, and after a weary.
I think they could have I don't know, made you go into that little alcove place, but I just, for me, completely missed that. And then I was watching explained videos, and there was a whole thing there that I completely missed. So yeah.
Well, this is the thing. Journey for me is always my Zen game. I'll always think of it as if I want to get a bit of peace, I'll go and either play that, or I'll go and watch people playing it, or just something like that, because it's this perfect sort of oral and visual soundscape of just being able to lose yourself in it. And I thought that when playing it, that was the best that this game was going to be. Just getting through it, just going, wow, really? Oh, it's about the journey, not the destination.
Hey.
And when the light enveloped me at the very end, and I was suddenly holding my controller and very aware that I was back in the real world, I was like, Jesus, what a satisfying game that was. I remember just having a really good day after that. But so the chills in that sense were I just feel satisfied for possibly the first time in my life. And then I got a second dose of satisfaction when I went back and played it again, and then realized that all of the other people that were going along the journey with you, they weren't some sort of AI or weird sort of gimmicky thing to try and get you to feel more. They were actual real players, and I didn't know that at the beginning. So I was suddenly I'm somebody else's one. I'm helping them on their pilgrimage, and they're helping me on mine. This is lovely.
Hitting your little toot button.
Yeah, and it was just one of those things where I just remember sitting back and just going, yep, that's a good game. Nothing's going to top that. And it didn't for about 5 years. I was like, cool.
So what you're trying to say is it's good not because of the journey, but because of the friends you made along the way. Is that the moral of the game?
It literally is that.
I've quit. Right, so for anyone that's watching this that was born, after the 90s, you probably were too young to realise the massive zombie explosion back in the zombie attitude era, when there were just zombies everywhere and there might have sort of been steel chairs and everyone was bleeding out the face. But when The Walking Dead finally exploded on our TV screens, we'd already had so much of it in the comic form, and just playing that game it was every 3 months they were trying to do, but it felt like every 6 years. But they got it out within about a year, the whole thing, and just sort of becoming Lee. And I'm never going to be a father, okay? There are enough humans out there, enough people that want to have kids. I'm just going to sit here with my lemons Robinson squash and just play some games.
We all know which radiation is the reason you're not going to be a father.
Radiation. But I've got one of those ring lights now. I'm like a YouTuber. But at the end of The Walking Dead, you really feel like you're Lee, and you see it pulled into this sort of you are Clementine's father, and you care for Clementine in a way that I just didn't feel was sort of gonna hit me around. And then The Last of Us came out a few years later, and then I was well, I do want to be the video game dad for everyone ever, so let me be video game dad from now on. But this was the real first one that really hit me, and crap, is my heart beating again? Is that?
I love that you felt this in digital form twice, but you don't want the real thing.
Right now?
And at the end, and now I'm going to spoil The Walking Dead. You should have all played it by now. It's free on PS Plus, so get on it. And if you're on Xbox, well, sort yourself out. Lee gets bitten, right? And you can either cut his hand off or you don't have to. And I cut his hand off because I want to save Lee. I want them to carry on into the next series, because we'd been waiting pretty much a year for this sort of conclusion. And Lee's not going to come back. Lee did some bad things to save Clementine. I won't go into that. And he's basically sitting there on his last legs, dying, as Clementine is now realizing who he shielded throughout this whole time and who hasn't really known what's going on, and just sort of realized the world's a bit bad, but she hasn't really been exposed to it. And when the first time she has to properly actually go and kill something is she has to shoot Lee basically. And when you tell her, you can either tell her it's gonna be okay, just make sure you're just gonna be a hard nut, or look after yourself or something like that. And you just don't know what to say. You choke up, and you just want to make sure that she's okay. And you could leave this game here and not play the others, and it'd be some perfect sort of how many ever that was, but thinking about it now, I'm dying inside because I'm trying not to cry in front of a camera or tear up. But yeah,
never has so much banter been put into one tragic video game moment. Yeah. Jesus, man!
So many emotions are destroying me. We started the Attitude Era, and then we come out and it's now it's all over. And now
the Attitude Era had some emotional highs. Just saying.
Yeah.
Is this your demo reel? Is this your demo reel? Are you shopping yourself around as an actor? Is this your emotional range you've got going on right now?
There's props over there, but I can't get to them without you seeing my legs because I'm wearing shorts. So that's another thing going on here.
Ben, seriously, mate, I hate you for the fact that you've started talking about The Walking Dead's ending, which is genuinely so emotional, and you use the words hard nut, and I was like, don't laugh, because it's the emotional moment of her trying to shoot him at the end. And you're like, oh, are you going to be a hard nut? Are you just?
I couldn't bear being horrible to Clementine in any way, and even with Kenny, and I wanted Kenny to carry on love me, even though he was going through the stresses of losing his entire family to this crap. Do you be nice to Kenny, or do you force him to be no, Kenny, you should shoot your own son in the face because this will help you later on in life.
Shoot him in the face.
Yeah, they pretty much aim it at the face. It's just all these sort of things that build up to this, and that Lee's never going to see Kenny again. You tried to sort out Ben, but he was a bloody idiot for the whole thing, and it's good for him on dying. I can't say those bad words. But yeah, that moment for me, Clementine and Lee, the final moment, says she shoots him and then becomes a hard nut.
Right, for my one, let me take you back to a time when Assassin's Creed was associated with really cool, choreography, fight choreography, and really over-the-top stuff. And there was a time, way back across the original trilogy when it was oh my God, what is the full story? What's going on with the future people? What's going on with, way back in the past, and Adam and Eve are breaking out of this facility, and it's this crazy sci-fi thing, and whatever. And so my moment is the end of Assassin's Creed 2, where after having, having gone a couple of years after the original one, all these different theories on what the hell it all means and all that kind of stuff, and at the very end of Assassin's Creed 2, after you've killed the Pope, you then get greeted by this sort of holographic projection of this woman called Minerva, who essentially breaks the fourth wall and talks to the camera, because even though you're playing back in Renaissance era Italy or whatever, she's talking through the camera, through the lens, to Desmond, who's controlling Ezio in the present / the future, to the scene that's happening, which is also talking to you as the player. And she says, Desmond, you're going to need to do all this stuff to save the Earth, but obviously Ezio doesn't know what any of that means, and he just stands there and he's like, who is Desmond? What's going on? And at the time, that was a big old deal. I feel like Assassin's Creed's got a hell of a lot away from that, but that was a big old talking point back then. And the bit just after that where they fade to black and Desmond just goes, what the F, was brilliant. So that would totally be mine. The moment when they just steered full bore into the theory-based stuff, and it was lovely. So Assassin's Creed used to be really good.
I've only ever heard about this sort of thing on podcasts, and I don't think I ever want to see it. I just want to hear it for the rest of the time. Someone else telling me. But when you killed the Pope, did you kill him in that tank that Da Vinci built? Is it who builds you the tank?
What is this game?
There's no tank. There's no tank in Assassin's Creed.
There is a tank in Assassin's Creed.
Leonardo da Vinci is like the Tony Stark of
Yeah, he builds a tank at one point.
No, actually, you're not wrong. There is that, there is that thing that you jump on and ride for a bit. I never thought of that being classified as a tank, but yeah, sure. Yeah, there
Scott,
is. There's a tank.
You have laid down all the reasons that I don't like Assassin's Creed.
What? These are all the reasons I love Assassin's Creed.
I love Assassin's Creed, but all the things that you love about Assassin's Creed are the things I hate the most.
We've always clashed on this. Yeah, we've always clashed on this because you like all the historical stuff, and if they just committed to the history stuff, it would be perfect. Whereas I'm like, no, do more angels and demons and the asteroids coming.
Nolan North, protagonist number 506, mate.
all the stuff about who was subject to 16. You put on the eagle vision. There's all the graffiti on the walls. What does it all mean? They didn't know the lead creative left the project, but at some point it was going to be good. They had a whole thing planned. We were all there for the ride until the ride was shut down.
We've got our own Assassin's Creed Brotherhood here right now.
First off, I want to just clarify that I feel like I've just watched a collective breakdown watching all of these go before me. One of the most powerful moments that gave me chills is winning a Warzone match every single time it happens. But I'm not going to bore you with those stories today, because at one point we need to have a whole Chatty Faces where we just watch clips of Adam Cleary C4ing helicopters, and that's going to be the whole thing.
It's all I've got.
But the serious one I'm going to talk about is the end of The Last of Us Part 2, but one bit in particular where you're Ellie, you've been through this whole, revenge thing. You've let Abby slip through your fingers once, and then ultimately she decides that she can't let it go, and she goes after her yet again. But when she finds her, she's been through hell. Abby, that is, she's being taken prisoner. She's emaciated. She's been literally crucified. And it looks like seeing Abby in this state is finally going to change her mind. And finally, she's going to, get over her thirst for revenge and actually help her escape, actually help her do something good. So they go off to the boats together. It looks like she's going to let them leave. And at that point, you get this very quick flash of dead Joel from earlier in the game. It's very, very quick, just while she's looking at her hand. And it's so unexpected because the audio is still in the scene itself, so you can just hear the waves. And you just get this brief flash of, Joel's corpse, essentially, his bloody, battered corpse. And it's took my breath away in the worst, most visceral way, because I just couldn't believe it. Because not only is the image itself very scarring, at that point that she's, she can't just walk away from this. She's got this flash, she needs to finish it. You get this really overblown, violent thing where people are losing fingers, they're just going at it. And then you get another flash just as Ellie's about to kill Abby of Joel sitting on the porch again with the guitar. And it's the same thing, the music doesn't cut to the new scene, you just get a brief image of it, and that's enough to kind of take her out of the fight. And those two moments, I just remember seeing them happen, and it's just such ultimately in the whole scene, it's such a small stylistic flair. It's literally 2 frames from previous moments in the game, but they're so loaded with meaning and loaded with emotion that you just understand why initially she turns around and forces the fight, and then why ultimately she pulls away, and then you get, at the very end, you get that scene with Joel on the porch properly fleshed out, and you get the last interaction between them, and the chills from that point just don't stop coming, and it just becomes the most harrowing and sad thing ever. I watched it on YouTube before, recording this, and even then, with the glare of the sun on the screen, watching it in tinny headphones, it still sent me, man. It still sent me.
That whole final bit, I've never been so emotionally done. After that, just sitting there, just being spent by the whole thing, just needing to sit and just be completely raw for a couple of hours. Yeah, it's a hell of a thing.
You described the flashes.
It wasn't that bit. It was the bit just sort of prior to the last segment where you've had a little run around in the house, everything sort of going well, and I've still got it. I've still got the screen grab from it on my PlayStation, where she's leaving the room in the middle of the night, and I genuinely put the controller down. I was like, if I just don't play anymore, then she stays in that house.
Yeah.
I could just turn it off and that's the end of the story as far as I'm concerned, but like Ellie, you had to go. You had to
that feeling though of just being can you not just stay and appreciate this?
Don't.
After describing the flashes, I can then see Josh is describing these flashes, and I don't know, it's minor sort of flashbacks. I know those points, and then when Clary was talking about the farmhouse, I thought we was going to go into the bit where you're trying to get that lamb and the door shuts, and Ellie totally loses it and then doesn't realize where she is, and then the whole Joel saying, "I'd like that." And it's never going to not make me cry. I played it again like the other week with someone else sitting there watching, and she just lost it as well, and just had to just stop and have a good old cry. And just it's that sort of moment where video game dad died.